Deculein tells R'lin that he was the one who allowed the commoners to make a club. Deculein says that he could hear the old man looking for him from the other end of the hallway and asks if Deculein needs to get R'lin's permission to make decisions. Although he came to the university earlier to escape from his nagging sister, now he had to deal with complaints as soon as arriving at work. Deculein also couldn't stand the fact that R'lin was covered in sweat as he was a germaphobe. R'lin says that Deculein misunderstood, as R'lin just thought the place was too empty and that he just wanted to help the students get better equipment and furniture. R'lin says that he will take full responsibility to make the club room look better. Deculein agrees and R'lin laughs nervously. While leaving, Deculein looks at Beck and says that those akin to cockroaches always act like them too, before excusing himself. At his classroom, the kids whisper that it has been a while since Deculein's last lecture. Some talk about the train incident at Berkt, about how he lifted the whole train. Deculein silences everyone and begins his lecture. The topic was pure magic and magic interference, the act of interfering with another mage's magic. He tells them that there will be a practical before he explains the theory. Then Alan walks in with a box of mana stones. With the snap of his finger, the stones all float into the air and soar towards the students, one stone for each. He tells them that the stone costs 3,000 elni each and that he won't cast anything other than telekinesis on the stones. He tells them that they can keep the stones if they manage to interfere with his telekinesis and take the stones. Ephen yells that she agrees to the terms as soon as she hears how much the stone costs. Her friend Julia quickly shuts her up. Deculein is annoyed by her actions but still continues to explain the process and tells everyone to give it a try. Everyone tries to follow his instructions. The whole class goes silent. Although it looked like a practical, Deculein just wanted to test how his telekinesis would hold up against 150 mages, not to mention some of those mages were archmage candidates. Ephen thinks that her scholarship funds were almost drained out and that this magic stone came right at the perfect moment for her. Sylvia looks at Ephen and remembers how Deculein told her that Ephen concocted her weakness herself and decides not to lose to Ephen. Some of the students start bleeding through their noses and some start trembling. Alan says that it was so incredible that Deculein wouldn't falter even when 150 mages were trying to interfere with his magic. Deculein himself was surprised that they weren't able to do anything in so long. Just then he notices one of the stones escape his grasp. It was Sylvia. Sylvia quickly looks at Ephen, who still hadn't finished interfering with Deculein's magic, and smiles. Deculein congratulates her on being first. She just nods, suppressing her happiness. Deculein looks around to see if anyone else was close to finishing it. He then notes that one more person just finished. Sylvia looks up in surprise. It was Ephen securing her 3,000 elni. Sylvia grits her teeth. None of the other students manage to break through Deculein's magic. He tells them to stop, seeing them struggle so much. He calls them pathetic and asks them to take a break and clean up the mess they caused. While resting, Julia asks how Ephen managed to break through. Ephen says that she almost died trying herself, but then she had an epiphany. Even though she didn't know much about telekinesis, when she tried to break through Deculein's magic, she felt like she broke something. Sylvia was listening to them talk. She wonders how someone who was ranked last and lowest in the previous test managed to become second. She thinks that the rumors of Deculein teaching Ephen and leaving work late were true. She wonders if Deculein lied to her and what Deculein thought was so good about a halfwit like Ephen. She calls Ephen arrogant. After the break, Deculein acknowledges that they all tried their best. However, he tells them that there was an easier way to stop his telekinesis. He says that those who managed to break through the first time might already have an idea, the method of mana interference instead of the traditional magic interference. Unlike the commonly known method, the mana interference method needs deep understanding of the other person's spell. However, since it won't work on magic that you don't personally know, it isn't used commonly nor is it highly recommended to learn. He tells them that there is no gain without pain, and tells them that now he will teach them the method of the crux. To understand and learn about how to figure out the magic circle the opponent is using just by looking at the central circuit. He says that he will go through almost all of the magic circles in existence one by one to teach them. He starts listing off the magic while casting the circle along with it. 2 hours later, he suddenly stops and says that since they wasted his time before by not being able to finish the practical in time, they should go through the rest of the contents themselves. He leaves without waiting for them to respond. As soon as he leaves, the class erupts into chaos asking why he would leave without finishing and how they were supposed to figure it out themselves. Ephen was satisfied with the fact that she was able to break through Deculein's magic before. Just then someone calls her from behind. It was Beck. Julia asks if he was starting shit again and if he was itching to start fights for no reason. He says that it was because they were showing off too much even though they were just commoners, and asks how Ephen managed to get to the second of the class from the bottom. Ephen shrugs and says that someone like Beck would never understand even if she explained. Beck asks if Ephen bribed Deculein with her body since she had nothing else to offer. Ephen looks at him and asks what he means. Beck says that everyone knew about how she got private lessons from Professor Deculein. She says that she never had anything of the sort. Beck asks how a halfwit like her, who wasn't even in an academy, improved so suddenly. He asks if Deculein went easy on her to give the mana stone to her as a gift. Ephen starts glowing green and threatens him to keep talking if he wanted his jaw hanging. He asks if she thinks he will give in. Ephen tells him to go ahead and try. Just before they started fighting, Julia tugs on Ephen's sleeve and asks Ephen to go outside with her, as Julia didn't want Ephen to get punished again. Ephen remembers how Deculein told her not to lose her cool for simple provocations. She takes a deep breath and thanks Julia with a smile. She says that she was in the wrong for trying to converse with an idiot, and Julia says that it was all right. They leave the class to go to the cafeteria, and Sylvia, who was watching the whole thing, was surprised herself to see Ephen not fall for provocations. Later that day, Ephen stomps her foot and clenches her fist while saying that she held herself back because of Julia, but if she saw Beck again, she doesn't think she can hold herself back. When she turned the corner, she saw a familiar face, Sylvia. She asks if they could talk. Ephen asks if Sylvia was also trying to pick a fight now. Sylvia, without skipping a beat, asks if Ephen was being tutored by Deculein. Ephen starts breathing fire and asks how that makes sense, as Deculein and she have the worst relationship ever. She asks why everyone was trying to pick a fight with her all of a sudden. Sylvia tells Ephen to keep her secrets, which makes her feel even worse. And Sylvia tells Ephen about how Deculein had not stepped foot into his lab in more than 3 years since Ephen's father had passed. Ephen laughs and says that it was to be expected, as Deculein couldn't do anything without her father, who was a genius. Sylvia then asks if Ephen knows that Deculein has been going to the lab every day for the past 3 months. She tells Ephen that Deculein had cleaned the lab and also chose an assistant. Also, he brought more magical tools. Sylvia asks Ephen if she knows what that means. Ephen wonders if Deculein was planning to extort her father's research again, but Deculein wasn't capable of continuing the research himself in her eyes. She clenches her fists but says that she doesn't know what Deculein was up to and that it doesn't have anything to do with her. Sylvia sighs in relief and leaves, saying that she just wanted to let Ephen know about the lab situation. Several days later, on the day of the next lecture, they assemble in a strange place. Julia wonders what they were going to do there. Just then, Beck rushes past Julia, intentionally bumping her shoulder. Ephen holds Julia back this time, asking her to be the bigger person. Deculein silences everyone and tells them that this was the last practical before their exams. And when he snaps his fingers, the huge curtains fall and the whole area filled with people behind them is revealed. Deculein explains that they will be demonstrating magic combat in front of all the spectators. The rules are that at least 3 forms of elemental magic must be used. Winning or losing doesn't matter. The score will be focused on the fight itself. He also says that Relin will supervise the fights in order to avoid any injuries, so there were no restrictions on the fights. Immediately after explaining that, he calls out one of the students and asks them to pick their opponent. When the student picks their opponent, Deculein starts the fight. The magic matches progress smoothly. While the students fought, Relin made sure they wouldn't harm each other, and Deculein wrote down the students' strengths and weaknesses. While the first few fights were a little awkward due to the unfamiliarity of the students with battle, they soon adapted and started focusing on their magic. After a while, with a huge explosion, Sylvia beat another student. Beck says that all the commoners keep losing against Sylvia and that they don't belong in the university, but in a garden instead, to clean. Ephen thinks that these cruel dumbasses wouldn't last a second against Sylvia themselves to be talking so much shit. Ephen tells her friend that he did a great job. Deculein calls Beck to the middle and asks him to choose his opponent. Beck, of course, chooses Ephen. She thinks that it was for the better. When she gets in the ring, he immediately starts mocking her again and says that there won't be anyone to secretly tutor her inside the ring. Ephen asks if talking shit is basic manners for Beck and says that he looks hella lame trying to copy Deculein's style. She then casts her magic while saying that she will prove his magic is just as lame as him. Beck rushes at Ephen while saying that he will help her meet her parents. It seems like Ephen was hit by Beck's magic, and Beck celebrates, but then he notices a shift below him. Ephen, still unharmed, uses her magic to make a fist and send Beck flying. While he was crying on the ground after losing, she asks how he felt getting destroyed by a commoner. Deculein says that it was quite disappointing that the fights ended so quickly and that the spectators they invited didn't even get a proper show. Ephen asks if she can have another chance. She says that she was supposed to use 3 types of elemental magic, but her opponent was so weak he got beat in one. Deculein thinks for a while and says that she was right and asks her to choose anyone as her opponent. Ephen points at him and says that she wants to fight Deculein. Relin goes full no filter and asks if Ephen was crazy. Even the other students thought she was insane. She expected everyone to kick up a fuss, but this was an opportunity to fight Deculein she had longed for. Deculein smiles at her request. While Relin was going on and on about how deranged Ephen was, Deculein stops him and asks him to compose himself before accepting Ephen's request. He points out that he did indeed say she could choose anyone as her opponent without restriction. With that being said, he also mentions that since he was a professor, she couldn't possibly fight him on equal footing. He offers to not attack first and says he would admit defeat if she made him move from his current position. Ephen accepts and immediately starts casting her spells. She had yearned for this opportunity desperately, to have a match against Deculein. As soon as he tells her to start, she attacks him with magic. Even though she knew she wasn't a match for him, she wanted to gauge the gap between them. After her first attack is blocked, she uses the flowing fire magic that Deculein had taught in class. Deculein gets engulfed in fire. Ephen doesn't stop there. She uses earth magic in tandem to trap Deculein in place, knowing he would lose if he tried to escape. Relin and the students couldn't believe their eyes, but then the earth spell she casts starts breaking. Deculein stands inside, unharmed. Ephen gets frustrated and starts barraging Deculein with magic projectiles. They all disappear before they reach him. He was interfering with her magic. She prepares for her next attack, but this time her magic doesn't work at all. She wonders if she made an error in her magic circuit, but Deculein tells her that she won't be able to use magic in front of him anymore. She realizes he had completely disabled her ability to use magic somehow. But then she decides to use magic combat instead, running at him since she was more confident in close combat anyway. Deculein lifts his hand and flicks her forehead, sending her flying to the other side of the arena. Deculein wasn't expecting her to fly off so far from a flick. He then evaluates all the strategies she used. Her magic sense was great, and she had the ability to use any element as long as she wore the bracelet she possessed. He thinks that the real Deculein would be very jealous of her talents if he saw her. He walks up to her and says she had lost, and that the fight was not bad. Ephen is surprised. He walks away while announcing that it was the end of the public practical, and that they should go prepare for their upcoming exams. The students were also surprised that Deculein acknowledged someone, but they also think Ephen did really well. Beck was catching strays, as everyone thought his fight was a snooze fest. Ephen asks if she just got acknowledged. Her friends run to her, saying how proud they were of her. Meanwhile, in a port, Ganesha waits for a ship to dock. As soon as it does, she greets the people disembarking. One of them is a girl who greets Ganesha, and Ganesha asks if Leah didn't miss her. She says she missed Ganesha, maybe just a little. It was Yuria, the island girl who Yuara, Woojin's ex-girlfriend, had possessed. Ganesha hugs Yuria tightly and says that she missed Yuria very, very much. Yuria says that Ganesha is hugging her too tightly. Ganesha quickly loosens her grip while apologizing. Yuara, on the day Woojin got struck by the blinding light, was also hit and woke up in a forest. In front of her, Ganesha and her lackeys were bickering about how they couldn't do something like kidnapping a child. Her lackey asks why she folds so easily to handsome men's requests like Deculein. Ganesha goes up to Yuria and asks if she was Rhea. Confused, Yuara looks around and after a while understands that she was inside the game they were developing. She decides to play along and says that she was Yuria, and that's how she got under Ganesha. Ganesha tells the kids to stop running. Yuria stares at Ganesha, one of the strongest adventurers in this world. Yuara knows that being next to Ganesha is the best and easiest method for her to survive, and maybe to find a way to return to. Back in Deculein's manor, Deculein opens the box containing the wand he had commissioned to make. He thinks that it looks beautiful, a wand made for a Euclide's wielder. And now that he sees how good that wand is, the 9 million elm price tag seems like a bargain for him, even though he thought he was getting ripped off at first. Butler Roy calls Deculein from behind the door and says that dinner was ready. At the dinner table, lavish food was spread across the table. Deculein, after looking for a while, tells his sister how she told him that the family finances weren't looking good, and now they had a lavish meal, which was way more than usual. His sister says that they need the energy to overcome the challenges. Butler Roy says that it was because of the antiques that Deculein had them sell. The bids for the items went so high it was causing a problem for the auction house. His sister and Roy were in tears after seeing the prices go that high, as now they had enough money to not even care about the finances for several years. Roy says that Deculein's sister is just too shy to admit it herself, as this was her token of gratitude to Deculein. Deculein says that he could get used to the lavish food, and nods his head while saying that she agrees, after which he points out that the way his sister holds her knife is wrong, and she gets flustered. Later at his office, while going through old documents, Deculein becomes quite disappointed in the old Deculein. He had to put extra effort to make the questions for the upcoming exams because when he looked at the old question papers from previous years, they were all questions impossibly difficult for students. All the questions were filled with his arrogance. He couldn't believe how wretched Deculein's personality was. Perhaps the old Deculein mistook the exams as an opportunity to flaunt his own superiority. Woojin wished to submit only good questions, questions that have a challenging process and questions that bloom a sense of pride after solving them, questions that spark understanding in the mages. There was one more box of old questions remaining. When he glanced at it, he immediately noticed that it was different. Just by reading a few lines, he knew that this wasn't something Deculein could come up with. Even though the difficulty was still high, the questions ignited incredible interest. Of course, using his comprehension skill, he could understand any question. When he infuses his solution to the magic exam paper, it exudes different colors of lights. They merge to form a silhouette, a woman in a white dress with long white hair. Deculein was impressed. He thought that this question had to be in the exam. He could feel a sting of jealousy from Deculein's body. Woojin was sure that Deculein understood the degree of perfection this question had, something he couldn't create with his own talents. Deculein then wonders who the woman was. She looked quite familiar. At the dean's office, she receives a letter notifying that the matter about the blood shrouds would be discussed in the next meeting. The letter had a seal of High Elder Dezektin himself. The dean found it interesting that the outcome of the blood shroud became this way thanks to Deculein's strong aversion to their suppression. She says that it was quite unexpected while addressing the other professors. Deculein, the chairwoman and dean of the Magic Tower and the Imperial University, a mage renowned for her immense magical prowess and the most promising candidate for the archmage position. Despite all these titles, she was surprisingly easygoing. While the students rumored about how Deculein and Julie got into a fight or how Professor Rillin failed his diet within record time again, she would always be listening from a corner. Her curiosity when it came to worldly affairs and love for gossip came from a hidden truth about her origins. She was a half-fairy, which means that her magical prowess was built on the fairy's incredible magic power. Even though she never made it look like it, she would always look forward to meetings like these, where all the professors would gather before her once a month. She puts on her distinguished act and says that it was quite interesting how Deculein sided with the heretics, and more often than not, Deculein would be the one who ends up in an awkward situation. Deculein would often respond by asking if she was implying that he, who is a great Eucline, would do something to impress others. But now that Deculein wasn't in attendance, one of the professors says that at the sorcerer meeting, someone called Lady Lunia made an appearance. Lunia was a woman who once competed with Deculein for the position of head professor and had to resign voluntarily as a result of Deculein's schemes. She was currently believed to be in the kingdom. Deculein asks what brought Lunia back to the empire so suddenly. The professor says that she was guaranteed a position. The professor says that he thinks the magic tower would greatly benefit from Lunia since she had achieved great accomplishments in the kingdom. And since Deculein was now siding with the heretics, he implies that they should remove Deculein from the chief professor position without putting it into words. Deculein agrees to give it a thought if Lunia truly returns, and all the professors' faces light up. She then reminds them that this was the last day to submit their questions for the exams and asks them to hurry up, and they scramble out of the room. Deculein asks to herself if Deculein hadn't been acting weird lately. Even the test he submitted was too well crafted to have been his own. She thinks that there was no way he made it on his own and decides to mess with Deculein a bit. And if Lunia, his arch-rival, showed up too, she can't hide her excitement for what was about to happen. Few days later, on the day of the midterm exam, the students were uneasy since Deculein's tests were known to be bizarre. Some even decide to give up before the exam started. Alan tries to calm the students while trying to explain the test. He tells them that the test will take place over the course of 10 days, and the deadline would be on the midnight of the academic schedule's final Sunday. Each student would take the test individually in their own assigned room, and they can leave the room to attend other exams, eat, or to sleep. However, they aren't allowed to take their test papers outside, and it was an open book exam. Julia gets scared, as an open book exam and 10 days to finish must mean that it's way too hard. Ephen starts scrambling her hair thinking why Deculein can't just submit a normal test. Alan also tells them that Deculein would personally write the students who score perfect, marks a letter of recommendation under his title as chief professor. The students start discussing with themselves about how big a letter from the chief professor would be in their career as mages. Mages can be ranked from rank 1, which are called archmages, down to rank 11, which are debutante students. To advance each rank, one had to pass promotional exams each time, and these exams are no joke. But if they had Deculein's recommendation letter, it would be akin to holding onto a wild card, which basically guaranteed promotion. Ephen thinks that a recommendation letter from her sworn enemy completely kills her motivation to do well. But then she thinks that if she really got the letter, it would increase her progress, and then when she eventually beats Deculein, she could say that if only he didn't give her the recommendation letter, he wouldn't be crawling under her feet, and he would beg for her mercy. She thinks that it would be very satisfying and decides to get a perfect score. Julie wonders if Ephen was okay, looking at her laughing like a villain. 4 days into the exam, Ephen was completely lost. First question, 1 hour, 4 hours for the next, 10 for the next. Each time she moved on to a new question, the difficulty also spiked. The questions were crafted with brilliance. While it was extremely painful to solve, each answer brought a sense of realization that she had never felt before. She wonders if Deculein really made this, and even though it was agonizing, she couldn't put it down as the joy of realization kept her hooked. She promised to get that letter from him, but she couldn't understand the question no matter what. She decides to take a breather, as her brain hurt the more she sat in that room. Outside, Sylvia sighs in relief as she finally managed to solve one of the tougher questions after spending more than 30 hours on it. She also thought about the recommendation letter, but her view was different. Anyone capable of scoring full marks on the test he gave wouldn't fail in the promotion exams anyway, so the recommendation was meaningless for her, but she still wanted the full score for herself. Each question is a key to unique enlightenment, and if she solved all of them, she knows that she will grow as a mage. Just then someone calls to her. It was Ephen. Sylvia wonders how far Ephen had got. When she asks, Ephen also asks the same question. They both quickly look away, flustered. Sylvia says that she was on question 8. Ephen, surprised, asks how Sylvia made it to question 8 so fast. Ephen says that she was stuck on question number 7. Sylvia wonders if Ephen was lying, but then decides not to worry about Ephen and focus on her own test. Ephen asks if Sylvia was leaving because she was here now, and Sylvia says that she just finished her break. While the students were busy with the exams, Deculein felt a massive shift approaching. The emperor was in critical condition. Emperor Krebin was known as gentle and mild-mannered, so he always sought out balance between divine and imperial power. He also never enforced any hostile policies against the Bloodshrouds. The problem was the king who will be crowned after the emperor's death. The next king was one of this world's most important figures and the most problematic. Sofian Yekatera August von Gibrin. The whole world was about to change under his rule. A week later, on the last day of the exam, during Deculein's marathon exam, a large number of students had dropped out. However, the distinction between the lower ranks and higher ranks was clear. Disregarding the grades, all those who participated in the exam bragged about it as if it was a medal. After the exam ended, the students reflected on what they had learned instead of relishing in their freedom. This was unusual and grabbed a lot of attention. Even the other professors wanted to take a look at the rumored question, and out of all the students, only 2 were still attempting question number 8. Ephen was hell-bent on solving the last question. Her desk had a heap of coffee cups and she looked like her soul was almost sucked out. But then Deculein and Alan notice a room glow bright gold. Deculein says that someone managed to solve the final question. Deculein expected that it would be her. Deculein opens the door and walks in after closing the door behind him. He congratulates her for solving the question. Sylvia turns around with tears in her eyes. All around her, bright colors filled with magical elements. Even from the cool blue colors, he could feel the warmth. Under the stars that shine with hope within the darkness. A true masterpiece. Just looking at it made him happy. Even though he was the one who made the question, he wasn't able to manifest the beauty due to his own limits. He structured the question on himself. Woojin, who dreamt of becoming an artist, however, lacked talent. He wanted to make people emotional with his pieces and continued to pursue art. Deculein's aesthetic sense was also fused into the question, because of which Deculein, who loves beauty, and Woojin, who dreamt of going to art school, were both comforted by Sylvia's magic. Deculein congratulates her again, and before leaving, he thanks her, leaving her speechless. He says that she also wanted to thank him. Before she came there, she had lost interest in magic because of the constant reminders from her family about how she must become an archmage. She says no to them. She says that magic was plenty beautiful by itself without her being an archmage. Later that day, Alan goes to Ephen's room to tell her that the time was up. Ephen says that it was a shame while smiling. Alan says Ephen did very well and that only 2 students even dared to attempt the last question. Ephen immediately knows that the other was Sylvia and asks if she solved everything. Alan nods, and Ephen sighs while calling Sylvia a monster who Ephen was jealous of. Before she knew it, the thought of getting the recommendation letter from Deculein was all gone. The only thing that remained was her inquisitiveness as a mage and her desire for knowledge. She wanted to answer everything too. She stands up and decides to try to solve the question even though the exam was done. Alan wished her luck while saying that he will be cheering for her. While walking towards her dorms, Ephen felt extremely tired. She feels that she would have felt better if she had answered all questions. Now the only thing waiting for her after the exam was a door marred with graffiti and a cold bed. She notices shadows approaching her. When she looks up, Julia and the other commoners. Julia says that it was standard to unwind after the exam together by eating something yummy. Ephen starts tearing up. Julia says that Ephen looked very dumb while crying and asks if the exam was really that hard. Then she says that Ephen was the one who had to pay for the food since she made them wait for so long. Ephen says that she won't. Several days later, Ephen managed to solve the final question by herself. It even brought a tear to her eyes. Just then, Julia knocks on the door and asks if Ephen was ready to go outside. They were both excited to finally be free from assignments and exams for a while. Ephen thinks that she made the right decision to not give up on solving the question since it was the best magical experience she had ever had. Julia asks if Ephen heard the news. When Ephen asks what Julia means, Julia says that it was about Deculein. Things have been crazy because of his exam question, she says. After taking a quick sip of her drink, she tells Ephen that Deculein was summoned to the floating islands. The floating islands here floated about 1,500 meters above ground level. It holds the community of mages. It is said to hold the world's knowledge and magic, an independent zone which was not influenced by the systems of Earth. Mages who were sincere in their pursuit of magic would inevitably gather in these islands, and several of these mages praised Deculein's exam papers, and he soon became a hot topic on the floating islands. That's why he was invited to give a special lecture on the solution to the test papers. Even Deculein himself wasn't expecting to get invited, but the fee that was offered to him for giving the lecture was too mouth-watering to refuse. He places the questions on the desk and greets all the attendants and introduces himself as a monarch-rank mage and the chief professor of the Magic University. He says that the lecture would be 2 hours long, but before he answered the questions, he wanted to explain his theory on pure elements. Aldeline asks the person next to her if she saw the questions, and the person next to her quickly says that the questions were obviously plagiarized and that there was no way Deculein would come up with something so incredible. It was Lunia, Deculein's arch-nemesis. The lecture was going smoothly, and he utilized the contents he used in the university to aid the listeners' understanding. All attendants were very attentive to the systematic and eye-opening explanation when he got to the 6th question. Someone stopped him to ask a question. It was Deculein. She quickly casts a spell and asks what she needed to combine with the circuit from question 6 to make it as destructive as possible. Deculein sighs, knowing that Deculein was just fooling around, maybe because she was suspicious of the question's integrity. Deculein decides to entertain her a little and solves her doubt, surprising her. This backfired as she kept on asking more and more questions. He answered all of them while showing comprehension at the same time. Fortunately, a lot of the other mages were displeased with her constant questions interfering with the lecture, and Deculein went quiet. Deculein looks at the time and says that since he had to spend so much time answering questions, he didn't have any time to explain the last question. Just then, another person raises their arm to ask one last question. She asks if Deculein's thoughts on the 8th question were correct. It was Lunia. Deculein asks what Lunia meant. She says that as the question reads, she was curious to know if Deculein himself thought of and wrote question number 8. The others start asking if she was accusing him of plagiarism. Deculein says that being inspired by concepts that are not one's own is quite common. However, while casting a rough spell from the 8th question, he says that this was all his. The attendants were mesmerized by its beauty. Deculein explains that it's different from the one stated in question 8 since he had to create it on the spot. He then looks at Lunia and asks if that was enough to answer her question. She doesn't answer while gritting her teeth, so he ends the lecture and walks out. Deculein knew that Lunia will stir up some trouble soon for him and wonders why he was always surrounded by so many haters. When he turns the corner, he notices someone waiting. She looks familiar, but he didn't know who she was. She made a disgusted face as soon as she saw him. He wondered what he did. Deculein then remembered that she was one of his peers during his university days. Deculein extends his arm for a handshake. Charlotte says that she didn't remember them being close enough to address each other by name. Deculein asks how Princess Manhwa was doing, which seems to have taken Charlotte off guard. Deculein didn't care or need to know if he was close with Charlotte. What was important was Princess Manhwa, whom Charlotte guarded. Since the Emperor was about to pass away, it would be a major turning point in the storyline, and many named characters would face life-or-death scenarios. One of these named characters that Deculein had to save no matter what was Princess Manhwa, a character Woojin modeled himself, and one which could become an influence on the main story in the latter half of the game. Since her bloodline was so complicated, she was the second in line for the throne in Yuran Republic, and also the third in line for the throne in Liak Kingdom. She was someone who blood and destruction always followed. She was currently staying in the Empire by using her studies as an excuse, but when the Emperor dies and she has to leave the Empire, she will be in danger. Charlotte says that Deculein still had the knack for forcing people to say cruel things to him, even though it's been so long since they met. Deculein gives her an orb and tells her that he will be the lifeline who will save her and her comrades when the time comes. After inspecting the orb, she realizes that it was a communication crystal. He told her to communicate with him after she had decided on what to do. She said that she would never accept help from a mess like him. Deculein tells her that she doesn't have an option if she wanted to keep the princess alive, but if she decided to stay stubborn and risk the princess's life, he asks her to do as she pleases while walking away. While she was debating on what to do, a worried voice asks if Charlotte was doing all right. It was the princess. Charlotte tries to hide her worries, but the princess knew what was happening and asks Charlotte to not stress herself out. The princess knows that her brother's followers will arrive soon and either try to use her or get rid of her. She says that she was nervous. The princess had fled to the empire using her studies as an excuse. It was a great place to live, and it was safe for her. However, the next emperor won't leave her alone, and she knows that she needs to leave quickly. Charlotte understands. Looking at her worried, the princess calls Charlotte closer and says that the suitcase she held had all the money she had saved up until now. Charlotte asks if the princess was trying to give it to her. The princess says that she knows Charlotte was short on money for hiring escort mercenaries for their trip. Charlotte says that she can find another way to gather the money. The princess asks Charlotte to carry the burden all by herself, and that the money was meant for everyone, and that it won't be a waste whatsoever. Charlotte hesitantly agrees. Someone was eavesdropping on their conversation from the outside. Charlotte notices them and quickly questions who they were, but the person runs away. The empire was already getting dangerous for them. Accepting Deculein's help was her last option. Back at Deculein's house, while he was reading some books, his sister tries to pester him, saying that she didn't remember him enjoying such an activity before. Not getting any reply, she calls him and says that she heard about how he got invited to the floating island and got paid to give a lecture. Deculein quickly tells Uriel that she isn't getting any of his money, and she tells him that she doesn't need money. She says that she just wanted to tell him about an official document from the university which wanted the debutante student mages to be allowed into the Deculein territory for their trip, and asks him to consider the request. He thinks about the mess the students might cause. Deculein says that cleaning up is impossible during those trips and that he won't allow any such trips under his watch. She asks him to stop being so stubborn while reaching into her pocket for the document, but Deculein raises his hand to stop her and asks her to leave quickly. When she tries to protest, he gives her a cold stare. She decides to give up and leave while pouting. After she leaves, he pulls out a communication orb and asks Charlotte to speak. Charlotte says that they have to act soon as there was no time. She asks Deculein to help her. Deculein immediately asks her to listen to every word he says. When she asks what he means, Deculein uses his telekinesis to bring a map close to him. He tells her that Princess Maho had only one way out, and it was a very dangerous route, but that also means that it would be dangerous for the pursuers. Charlotte asks what it was. Deculein says that they have to cross the crevice canyon. Charlotte protests against his decision, saying that place was crawling with demonic energy and that she shouldn't have trusted Deculein of all people in the first place. Deculein asks if Charlotte can single-handedly deal with all the pursuers on the normal route and asks her to trust his decision. Crevice Canyon, rugged terrain and dense demonic energy, it was located right next to the demon lair. There have even been demon sightings in this independent area. Deculein explains that this was the only way out for Princess Maho. Chirolto says that it was still too dangerous since they had no way to deal with demons if they faced them. Deculein reminds her that he was a Deculein and that he will be personally guiding her through. She was surprised to hear that he was going out of his way to help her. She asks what he was going to gain from this. Deculein says that he was quite interested in politics and that he was more intelligent and perceptive than Chirolto. She asks why he was suddenly shit-talking her. Deculein says that he was helping Princess Maho to survive so that his family and territory could benefit from her. It was like an unwritten deal. Chirolto asks where they were gonna rendezvous. Deculein tells her to meet him in 3 days at the entrance of the canyons, and that if she couldn't at least make it there by herself, she didn't deserve to live anyway. Chirolto agrees and hopes that he is as skilled as he was making it out to seem. 3 days later in Deculein's territory, a large mob of students from the university gather. Hydekin was the state capital of Deculein territory, a tourist destination known for its plentiful activities and food, a place created by reflecting the cities that were known for being great places to be. Due to this, the destination was proposed for several field trips, but Deculein always rejected them. Uriel asks why Deculein suddenly changed his mind and allowed the field trip. It was because Hydekin was very close to the Crevice Canyon, about a 3-4 hour horse ride, and he could leave when the chance arrived. Deculein asks what the students were saying, and Uriel says that the university had booked out a whole floor in the Hydekin Romance Hotel, 4 students designated to each room, although they could get their own room if they decided to pay on their own. Deculein does his minimum amount of work as a professor and gave a small tour. He tells them that he won't involve himself in their affairs, but the moment they dirty his hotel or his territory, he threatens that he would make sure to wipe the smiles off their faces till the end of their university days. After that, he invested his time to turn Hydekin into more of an outpost. Uriel brings all the skilled mages in the Hydekin magic tower to be evaluated by Deculein. She proudly exclaims that they were all very skilled. Of course, Deculein could see the golden aura around those who truly were talented. He tells Uriel to quickly raise the pay of the talented ones and to fire the mages who were freeloading. After spending the whole day making changes to how things worked in Hydekin, Deculein came to the campfire where all the students were gathered and they were tasked with making fireworks. Sylvia demonstrated her fireworks. The professors said that it was flawless and that it was to be expected. Deculein stays quiet. Both the other professors give her a perfect 10. Julia asks why the professors were giving them assignments when they were on a trip, and Ephen also agrees. Ephron's team was next to show the fireworks. They start explaining the formula they used. Rlin immediately stops them, saying that he was already bored of the explanation and that they could just go ahead with the firework. They shoot it and it explodes into many pretty colors. Even the other students were impressed. Rlin gives them 6 points, saying that it made too much noise. The other professor gives them a 4. Julia tries to ask what they did wrong and Ephen stops them. Deculein gives them a 10, saying that the balance between the destructive and ductile magic was very good. Julia was happy with 10 points. Later that night, while he was getting his horse ready to go meet Chirolto, he hopes that Chirolto could make it to the entrance safely. Just then Ephen asks if it was because of some sort of debt. Deculein was caught off guard, but then asks what she was doing out so far and tells her to head back. Ephen asks him to explain as he keeps helping even during the disciplinary hearing and the club room and even today. She asks if it was because of her father. Deculein gets on his horse and asks her to figure it out herself before dashing off. She shouts that she will apply to be one of his subordinates and do her best to do whatever it takes to expose him. She promises to surpass him and become far greater than him. After he was gone, she starts wiping her tears. Even though she said that, she didn't feel any death variable. Even Deculein didn't know what exactly happened between Ephen's father and Deculein before Woojin possessed him. After a while, he gets off his horse and sends it back to the stable and asks it to return by the next afternoon. He then pulls out his communication orb to contact Chirolto. Just then, behind him, they arrive covered in blood. Deculein walks up to them and bows to the princess while introducing himself and telling her that he will be guiding them through their escape. The princess thanks him. He then asks if it was tough for Charlotte to get all the way to the cavern since they looked like a mess. Charlotte gives Deculein a letter and says that it was from the adventurer team. Deculein reads it and calls them disgusting as if they don't know their limit. Charlotte asks if they can deal with all that themselves. Deculein asks her not to worry and tells them to keep up with him. While walking through the caverns, the princess asks what was written in the letter, as Deculein didn't look pleased after seeing the letter. Charlotte hesitates, but then tells the princess that there were 37 assassins and Dianantes chasing them. Princess asks what a Dianante was. Charlotte tells her that they were phantoms but also demons. Because of that, they were immune to most if not all physical and magical attacks. She says that even one of those is a bigger issue than all the assassins. She goes on to say that they get more sickening when they are produced out of a contract. The princess asks what she means. Charlotte explains that to form contracts with demonic beings, they use materials such as human bodies and demon horns. And those mages are willing to go so far to chase them, and they are the very people who the throne will go to once the emperor passes away. Yet still, Charlotte says that they can still be a little optimistic since the one guiding them was a Deculein, the once famed exorcist family. While walking through the canyon, Deculein realizes why it was called a demon's lair. The others were struggling to even breathe because of the dense demonic energy. But for Deculein, being around demonic energy would only make him stronger. While in this canyon, his mana quality reaches rank 4. To put that into perspective, commoners usually have a mana quality of 9-10. If a person has mana quality above 7, they can try becoming a mage or a knight. Above rank 5, the number of people having better rank significantly decreases. Most of the famous named people possess either rank 3 or 4 mana quality, and rank 1 is reserved to symbolize God, and there are only 4 people in the entire world with rank 2. The High Elder Dezekton for Berkt, Empire Guardian Knight Jeterid, Archmage Demerkin, and Chairwoman Adeline. With his rank 4 mana, he can easily deal with the Dianantes chasing them. Charlotte asks if they aren't moving too slow. Deculein asks if Charlotte lost her sense of judgment because she was in a rush. He tells her that the pace he is setting is the best to avoid becoming poisoned by demonic energy. Charlotte worriedly looks back at the princess, who assures Charlotte that she was okay and asks her to not feel so rushed. Charlotte smiles, seeing how warm the princess's heart was even though they were being hunted. Even though she was more restless and nervous than Charlotte herself, the princess was being mindful of her subordinates' feelings. Charlotte promises herself to not let the princess get harmed even if it costs her life. Just then the princess points ahead in a panic. A colony of bats headed straight to them. Charlotte prepares to take them down, but Deculein tells her to save her strength. His wood-steel shurikens spring to action. He controls a dozen of them with telekinesis and sends them straight toward the bats, shredding them to pieces in an instant. The escort mercenary says that it was expected of the chief professor to kill them all in one attack, and even the princess agreed. A little deeper into the canyon, they were in constant conflict with the lesser demons. The mercenary says that he was glad that at least they didn't come across the phantom demons they were initially worried about. Just then, Deculein warns someone that he will tear their limbs off if they got closer to him. The others wonder what he was saying. Just then, a mysterious figure reveals himself. He praises Deculein's instincts for someone who is about to be dead. Behind the man, a large number of foes appear. After seeing the numbers, Deculein immediately asks Charletto to take the princess and go first. Charletto tries to protest against it, but Deculein asks if she was pretending to worry about him and says that it was not necessary. She was taken aback by his foul mouth even in this situation. Deculein points his wand at the assassins and asks Charletto to look. As soon as he points, there is an explosion below the assassin group. Most of the assassins die immediately. Deculein says that he is more than capable of dealing with them and that Charletto should focus on her job and get away as soon as possible. Charletto understands and tries to take the princess. The princess points behind them. When Charletto looks back, a shadowy figure appears along with more assassins. Charletto immediately notices that it was a Dianante. Deculein says that the plans haven't changed and tells Charletto to leave. Charletto says that he can't deal with all this himself. Deculein says that he is going to kill the demon. The hired mercenary also decides to stay back and help Deculein while asking them to leave. Deculein says that there was no need to feel bad or hesitant and offers to send a few of his wood-steel shurikens as guards to escort them. Charletto grits her teeth and leaves while dragging the princess along with her, while also telling the two of them to reach the Urine Republic safely. A bunch of assassins run behind them, and the demon phantom thing starts laughing while wondering how far the two ladies could run. Deculein asks it to worry about itself. The thing calls Deculein arrogant and says that it's basically immortal to magic and physical attacks. Deculein thinks that the demon phantom was way too overconfident, but his opponent didn't know that Deculein had a bigger advantage. Not only was his mana quality significantly amplified, his mana recovery rate was also highly increased. Along with that, he could cast his Midas touch infinitely into his wood-steel shuriken. While the demon phantom was boasting about his strength, one of Deculein's wood-steel shurikens flanks the demon, and when he sees an opportunity, he sends it flying into the demon. The demon didn't dodge, thinking it was immortal, but Deculein continued to barrage it with the shurikens. Demon looked surprised, as it was the first time it had ever taken damage. It desperately tried to regenerate itself. The mercenary says that the demon's body was in pieces. Deculein tells the mercenary not to let down his guard, as it was not over until they shred the demon into such small pieces that it can't practically regenerate. He uses all his shurikens simultaneously and sends them all toward the still regenerating demon, continuously killing it over and over. The mercenary couldn't believe his eyes. Meanwhile, Charletto dealt with the last of the assassins chasing them. The princess was on her knees, and Charletto immediately ran to her aid. The princess assured her that she was just a little nauseous because of the demonic energy, and Charletto says that it was a symptom of demonic energy poisoning, but since they just left the canyon, they should be fine. Just then someone calls out to the princess. It was her uncle and the Minister of Internal Affairs, Gilland. Gilland asks forgiveness for not being able to go get her himself. The princess says that she was grateful to him for coming this far. He then looks at Charletto, who introduces herself as the princess's escort. Gilland thanks her for keeping his niece safe all by herself. Charletto says that they still had others who helped them. She looks back at the canyon and asks if they could wait for the others. Even after the sun goes down, Deculein and the mercenary are nowhere to be seen. The princess wonders if the others were all right. Charletto thanks Deculein for his noble sacrifice to guard the princess. The minister says that they had to leave soon as they were about to go into the territory of Urine. They notice two silhouettes. Deculein says that he was glad the princess made it. Charletto and the princess run towards them.